Deano, very nice to meet you. Thank you for coming to Almost Sound.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. I wanted to ask you, what's one of your first good memories with music?
Well, I come from a fairly musical family. My father was actually involved in the music industry, and my aunt, his sister, funny enough, were involved in the music industry in Cape Town for, I think, a good 3 decades or so. Mm-hmm. So my dad worked for major labels like Warner Brothers. There was a label called Gallo, which is quite famous internationally, but particularly famous in South Africa for its jazz catalog and blues catalog. Became fairly high up at the company, but he was mainly on the distribution side. So he always used to bring home like copies of the latest releases that he was basically distributing to stores, like physical stores when they were mostly still around. So for sure, my earliest memories were like going into the lounge of my house, and my dad's got his records there and drawers of CDs. I mean, at that time, it was just, I think CDs were kind of the booming format. Vinyls were kind of dying. Yeah. But naturally, when you, as a little kid, when you pick up a vinyl for the first time, it's like very kind of magical.
It's like magic.
It's like
what is this?
Piece of plastic that makes a noise. And CDs as well. So yeah, I think it was this. Like, I was just always curious about these things. And I guess I can't remember too vividly, but I'm assuming my dad played a lot of music, while I was, still a toddler. So yeah, I think that's where the curiosity came from. I think it was also just like the format, the visuals, like looking at the artwork, finding an interest in like, what is this thing? Then hearing the sonic part of it as well. And then just, carrying on being curious. Just be like month on month as he was bringing in more stuff that he was distributing. Yeah. I would like always want to like look through and like see what is here, like what is my ear gravitating towards. And it just became like a little bit of an obsession. And then that kind of just carried out like through my school years, basically.
Yeah. And was there, at what point did you decide to make music yourself?
I actually came from a more like live music interest. So I was like very interested in like metal, heavy metal, and like extreme music. I mean, I didn't dive straight into there, but like, my dad was also interested in like jazz, blues, rock. So, like seeing Led Zeppelin records and hearing that, I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this kind of a little bit more intense kind of music sound. I didn't know what it was at that point. And then as he was bringing in more stuff at home, I'd just be listening. And it was always just somehow like the heavier bands that I just somehow gravitated towards. I think I didn't necessarily understand it. And this is part of what grew the intrigue. I kind of gravitate towards things that like I can't figure out very easily. It like draws me in. And I think also like being a kid in the 90s, it was like skateboarding, like graffiti, rap, rock music. Like this was kind of the space I was growing up in like the, I guess for me, the later part of the 90s. And then it was just, once you get so obsessed with it, you like, well, how is this made? Like, how does this come to be? And then, I actually out of fairly practical reasons picked up guitar. I always wanted to actually be a drummer. But we stayed in like an apartment block, and my parents were like, "No, there's no way.
No way you can play this shit.
Yeah, the neighbors are gonna hate us." So I was like, "Okay, well, like, what's my next like the thing like the other thing I would do of interest?" And it was guitar. I don't know exactly why. It just felt like the next coolest after drumming. Yeah. And then, I think it was actually on my 13th birthday, I got my first guitar. Took lessons, learned the basics, like Beatles, like learning how to sing and play. And then I think that's probably where the curiosity kind of was initiated. When I picked up the guitar, and I was like, okay, now I understand a bit about how this thing is made. And then I had school friends who were like picking up bass guitar, another friend who was doing drums. And then, on the weekends, you do a little band practice sessions in your friend's basement. And I mean, this obviously predates the electronic stuff, but this is where I think the curiosity for like music making came in.
Yeah. Just a quick word before we go back to the interview. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the podcast. I'm Joseph.
And this is the Almost Sound Studio.
If you enjoy this content, please consider liking and commenting on this very episode, and also following us on the platform where you listen to or you watch the podcast, but also follow us on social media. If you have suggestions of guests that you really would like us to interview, see the link in the description. There's a form where you can submit suggestions for guests, and also if you have questions for them. Once again, thanks so much for watching and listening to the podcast. We love what we do. I hope to see you soon on a dance floor. Got it. And you grew up in Cape Town?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived my whole life in Cape Town, went to school in Cape Town, didn't actually travel at all until I finished my studies, which was, I think, around 2015. So yeah, basically like all my formative years were in Cape Town.
Wow. And how has that like kind of supported and inspired your music creation?
To be honest, for a long time, I kind of looked outward, like you're looking more towards America, Europe, again, like being kind of interested in the metal and rock scene. But although, funny enough, there were actually some good, like little local metal bands that were playing. I would go to like under 18 events. Parents would drop me off, be wearing like my hand painted like death metal t-shirts, like going to these gigs. And it was like very simple and very basic and very humble. And, I felt like I just fitted into these spaces, and it's like all I wanted to do every weekend. I think that was super important. I think also like those events were kind of, to some degree, like on the fringe of what else was happening. So I think this was also like partly informed like my interest in like, fringe stuff musically, creatively, which obviously later ties into like my electronic music discoveries. But yeah, it was like these little like pockets, these like little tiny niche scenes in Cape Town that kind of really drew me in. And yeah, it was never going to be like on the scale of like, I don't know, like American rock concerts. It was always very small.
Yeah.
Which was really, really nice. And yeah, I think we also had like a handful of bands, like international bands that came down, and I kind of got little touch points here and there of these bands I looked up to. And then otherwise it was stuff like the early parts of social media, like MySpace, like discovering more about like what's going on overseas, and like also having this desire to be involved in it locally. But I think it was nice in the sense that, it was like very small, humble, simple. Yeah, I think that I derived a lot of value out of it because of that, because it was intimate.
Yeah, so it's intimate, and so I guess smaller clubs, it's easier to connect with people, to understand. Once you find the community, it's easier to connect with people who are in the same interest.
Yeah, and Cape Town itself is a small city,
Yeah.
so like these little pockets were, especially small, because it was just people with these like niche interests in the context of Cape Town, who were coming together and like just enjoying the stuff.
Yeah. And for people who've never been to Cape Town, can you describe a bit of the layout of the city and the club scene compared to that? So clubs are very spread, or there is like a district or...
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, I've spent my whole life there, and it's evolved a lot over the years. But in essence, I mean, Cape Town is more of like a tourist city, especially in the context of South Africa. It's like, right down south on the coast, kind of like almost California-esque in a way. Palm trees, beach strips, beach bars, beach clubs. And even in my earlier days of going, to like live music gigs, these are like more in the inner city, the industrial areas, like really tiny little clubs. But at the same time, there were still, big nightclubs. I just, at that time, wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then skip, many, many years later, like now, a bunch of clubs have come and gone. It's not so easy to necessarily survive there having a club, just because of how small it is. It's difficult to sustain. But right now, we've got like one primary like techno club in Cape Town and one primary techno club in Johannesburg. I say techno because it's not very linear in its vision, like both clubs. Well, the one in Johannesburg a little bit more so than the one in Cape Town. You kind of have to find a way to appeal to a slightly broader demographic. Again, it's a small place. People have shifting interests, especially in Cape Town, which is more about being outdoors, being in the sun, beach vibes. It's not so conducive to like underground clubbing per se. Yeah. But yeah, we still have the one. And then, I mean, in my kind of more formative years, there were a couple of these smaller clubs that were not necessarily doing techno, but were also, again, doing stuff that was at the time considered a bit more fringe, like drum and bass parties, like more the harder side of drum and bass. A few of these kind of like electro clash dubstep, which was very big at the time. Yeah, there were a few of these kind of like key spaces that were around when I was like in high school and university. But I think pretty much all of them have closed. Like today, most of them are not open anymore. Right. So it's quite like it's kind of shifted quite a lot. Yeah.
So clubs shift hands, and then also like the interest of people shifts.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the interest of the people as well. Like there's just not enough people to sustain a lot of these kind of like niche little pockets for too long. Yeah. Right now, I mean, the techno clubs are lasting pretty well. I can't say exactly why that is the case, but Yeah, I'd say it's usually like 5 to 10 years. Like there's usually these kind of like ebbs and flows of these trends that come in and out. And yeah, it's a lot of local people also looking abroad, like what's kind of cool, what's trendy, what are people into. And this is how most people locally get their understanding of what electronic music is or what clubbing is.
Got it.
But yeah, of course, then on the side, we also still try cultivate something stronger. But we are just fully aware that it's, it's likely to be quite fleeting, or at least, to draw big numbers will not last forever.
Yeah. And do you think, so you're a resident of Modular Club, like your friends, like you've been involved with promoting as well before, but now you're also resident of the Vault events. How is Modular compared to the rest of the clubs? Is it known as the techno club or the underground electronic music club right now?
It is. Yeah. So that would be the one. Modular is the club that right now is considered kind of the techno club of Cape Town. But again, like techno broadly speaking.
Sure.
The Vault events that you're referring to are kind of the more, I'd say, kind of not necessarily harder techno, but a little bit more your kind of Berlin style or like European style, a little bit more heady, less commercial, if you want to call it that. But these nights happen like once a month at the club. But then the club does its own club nights. There's other promoters that do other things. Again, to like, I think, just sustain the space, interest enough people to like be there and be coming through the doors every weekend.
Yes.
But yeah, for me, the regular show is Vault once a month, where I feel like I can also like express whatever I want, which is really nice, even in the context of Cape Town, which is a little bit tricky.
Yeah. So I have some questions to this. It's super interesting as a concept. You feel you can express yourself. What makes you feel freer than other contexts?
Well, ironically, I think the kind of naivety of the scene, and when I say the scene, like the people that frequent the club, the people that are coming every couple of weeks. Yeah. Like people aren't like chin strokers. They're not like sitting there like listening to your every single mix. Like they kind of want to go there and like have fun. Yeah. They want to hear they want to hear you deliver something that's interesting. And again, when I say interesting for them, this is like a fairly base level thing. They want a kick drum, they want good energy, they want the DJ to be, giving them something. Not just standing around. Like, give them something and they'll respond. And it's quite nice, and you can really go on twists and turns. Actually, I find like more so than when I've played in Europe. Like in Europe, I feel a little bit more nervous to take certain twists and turns because I feel like there's often certain expectation of like what should be played or what is going to translate well, in the context of European clubbing. Not to say that there isn't freedom. It's just I feel a different kind of freedom back home. And it's probably also, by virtue of the fact that I've played there for so long and I know the crowd like the back of my hand. I know the space like the back of my hand. But still, I feel like if I'm playing a closing slot, which often is the case in Cape Town, is like I don't have to play the same thing every month. I don't have to be doing a certain BPM and a certain style. Like 1 month I could play a bit more kind of friendly, kind of groovy, maybe housey elements, even at a Vault set. And then the next month I could, I'm in the mood to actually like really go a bit tougher or go a bit more spacey. Like I can kind of do this, or even within the context of one set, I can do this. And I think as long as you're presenting yourself fairly authentically and with a good energy, like you'll get a good response. Yeah. And I feel like this is not always the case in Europe, at least from what I've seen. I think people are a little bit more discerning, a little bit more particular, which has its pros, but I think it also has a lot of cons.
Yeah, for sure. And this reminded me a lot of, and I've been thinking about this myself, but Lag was also like a producer. Yeah.
Well, we know Lag because actually there's a DJ Lag from South Africa.
Yeah, which is a different one. Yeah.
But I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, let's say the
Commissar Lag.
Yeah, Commissar Lag, exactly. And it said to me, like, I played this gig in techno uneducated crowd, which means people who didn't have an expectation what techno should be or is, right? So they were like just open to whatever I played, and he's really good producer. Like he has a lot of breath in his productions too. And he said it's super fun because like people don't give a shit about what that is supposed to be, right? They just, if you like it, the dance. I said like the vibe is great, people are dancing, the DJ's having a good time. why not?
Yeah, and I think when the DJ is having a good time, ultimately the crowd has a good time.
Yeah.
And I think when DJs feel stiff, it almost translates to the crowd.
Yeah.
So I think, look, I mean, I've seen many great sets from many great DJs in Europe, but still it has been like ones where they are comfortable, they're presenting their own thing. But I know for a lot of people, it's quite like a stiff thing, you know, like you're very like in your own head about like, what can I do? What can't I do? And then even if you play a good set, maybe it doesn't translate so well because you're feeling stiff. Your mixing's feeling stiff because you're worried about perception all the time.
Yeah.
But I understand this as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's normal. And for yourself, when you are preparing or you're about to play a gig, right? Is there any ritual, any way to make yourself feel more comfortable?
I mean, I've, like I said, played in South Africa so many times that it's very rare that I will get nervous.
Yeah.
It's more like nervousness from like a self-pressure, like I just want to do good.
Yeah.
You know, I want to have a good set. When I've played in Europe, it's been trickier. I haven't played too many times. I played a few times, and Asia recently, actually, as well, in Japan. That was trickier for me because I wasn't so used to, you know, being in this environment where I don't fully know the crowd dynamic. I've got my assumptions as to what it might be like. Then you kind of prepare for this, and you have like another folder with other stuff that is like if you need to take another direction. But still, it was quite daunting in a sense because I did feel more out of my comfort zone. And honestly, I didn't really have any mechanisms to solve this. I think it's more a case of like, do it more. And
Sure. And
I mean, sadly, I don't have that many opportunities to play in Europe. But I think if I did it a bit more, and I think if I probably prepared less, actually, might be a good strategy. I think the sets where I've like actually just been a little bit more free in my preparation and not been, you know, like rehashing my playlist over and over and over again. The gigs where like, especially in Cape Town, where it's like I'm throw a bunch of stuff in a folder like 2 days before I rock up, I actually have the best show because it's not, I can't like jump into any sort of plan. Or at least like maybe the first couple of tracks I'll play, but the rest is just all over the place and I've got to piece it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I've played in Europe, I've put more pressure on myself. Like, I should plan this a bit more carefully, and then you do, but then you get stiff. And then it's kind of hard to get yourself out of that stiffness when you've got this
When you're there,
kind of, you know, plan that you're working with.
Yeah.
So actually, I guess the answer to the question would be like, trying to allow myself to be a little less rigid in the planning.
Yeah. Remove a lot of the planning to not have expectations of how you should be or behave.
Yeah, or just set myself like parameters. Like, okay, you can plan for this, but like give yourself like 3 days to put the music in the folders, arrange them however you want to arrange them, and then like put it to bed. You know, and then go to the gig, and whatever happens from there happens. But still, I'm like I am a perfectionist, and I struggle to like do that and let go a little bit. But I think this would probably be a good, healthy thing to do. Yeah,
to find a way to have fun, right? And then how can I have more fun, 10% more fun before the gig?
Yeah, or just like try be a little bit less serious about it. I mean, at the end of the day, you like always say like you're pressing play and playing other people's music. Like, it's not that crazy. So like, why not just like distill it to the basics of what it is and play? But again, like, you also compare yourself to others, and it's competition with oneself, comparison. I want to be the best. It's, you know, it's like all of these things come into play. And then often, you want to like try and, you know, I don't know, develop some sort of methodology to try and like get it as perfect and precise as you can because you know, you want it to be perfect. Yeah. But oftentimes it kind of, the reverse happens. You land up less happy with the result of it. But yet, I don't know, still find myself doing it, you know.
It's normal. And like when you compare, for example, your DJing with production, do you feel with production, you feel free to express authentically what you have inside, or you still have sometimes like something kicks in your mind and say, I don't know, whatever, the voice says, oh no, this is too much, or this is not going to fit with the label, or it's not going to fit with someone else's label that I'm selling this to?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think less so these days. Like back in the day when I started producing, I think there was a lot more of this. But yeah, I mean, I'll try to give a simple answer. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're also, at least me, I'm predominantly producing techno music. Techno music is like, at least the style of music I'm making is like tools for the club. It's dance music, you know? So like, I'm not necessarily doing it as like a full like artistic expression of myself. I kind of just enjoy the process, and I enjoy tinkering around with synths and sounds and putting beats and rhythms together. Like I enjoy this process, and it's not so much of a emotional outlet. But when I do want to kind of have something more of an emotional outlet, because naturally music still has that aspect for sure. But I usually won't write techno tracks. I'll just be like, you know what, I'm in this space that I'm in right now. It doesn't feel right to write club music. I mean, a good example is like over the pandemic period, I like kind of lost my spark for wanting to write techno. I wasn't in clubs. I wasn't feeling so inspired to like scroll through folders looking for kick drums. You know, like it felt like a very silly thing to do. And then I just spent time making other sounds like ambient tracks, offbeat tracks. I mean, before techno, I was also into a whole lot of other stuff, and I still am. Like IDM, you know, I loved IDM and those like weird, complex sounds, and yeah, ambient's more of like a new discovery. So yeah, just kind of like if I felt like I needed to let something out emotionally, it usually wouldn't result in a techno track. Usually, the techno tracks are as a result of like being inspired by social connections, being in certain club spaces, or being in certain cities where I feel like, okay, this can translate well into a track for the club.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of feels like for you techno tracks are a bit more functional in a way.
Totally. Yeah.
Both inspiration wise and also direction, and then you have other things in life or moments give you a different type of inspiration and make you do abstract or different.
Yeah, and often that other music is like not even released. It's just
for you.
It's kind of like, you know, putting up your easel and putting paint on a canvas, and you're not necessarily like doing it to sell it. Yeah. You just feel like expressing something. Yeah, and I mean, I've definitely in writing techno, I think just even being in the studio space, being in my own headspace, there is an emotional aspect to it. But I'd say less so.
With techno, you mean?
Yeah. I think it's more of like the act of being in the studio and the act of making something.
Yes.
There is some sort of like emotional dialogue, but I think, I mean, if you listen to a lot of my catalog, I mean, it's like loopy, bleepy techno. I mean, I just like making that. I get fulfillment out of making that. And yeah, if I'm in a bit of a different headspace, like maybe that is the thing that will help me get through that. Yeah. But I won't necessarily like think of like how do I reflect my emotions like in this track really.
Yeah. And for the rest of the music, let's say in general, how connected are you with your emotions? So for example, beyond music, for a second, like when you feel something that is strong and is emerging, do you have a good relationship with emotions? Can you understand, I'm feeling whatever, sorrow, and it's like going through me?
Yeah. I consider myself a pretty like emotional person. Yeah. But I'm like introverted by nature.
So you don't express it necessarily, or
don't? Actually, I'd say like more socially introverted and emotionally reasonably extroverted. So I do find it easy to like understand how I'm feeling and try and deal with it in a certain way. Yeah. Sometimes music is the outlet for that, but oftentimes not. Like oftentimes, we were speaking earlier, like I need to go into the gym and hit a boxing bag, or do a sparring session and get hit in the face. You know, So you know, maybe that's I'm going through something where that's the outlet I need, or maybe I need to go for a cycle along the coast and like breathe fresh air. Yeah. Maybe I need to be in the studio and write ambient. Maybe I need to write a techno track. I try and like understand what it is I'm going through at a given time, and then do something that will try and reflect that. I mean, look, this is also mostly talking about like difficult emotions. But like, yeah, when it's good, I think when it's like kind of good emotions, which I consider like inspiration or like feeling some sort of like fire, that will usually be when I'm like, okay, I want to write techno tracks. You know, I feel a good energy. I feel inspired by people, places. Yeah. That will translate into more of these kind of functional tracks. If I'm in a little bit more of a tricky space, probably I'll try to remove myself from the studio. Or if I feel like, okay, actually, you know what, the studio is the right thing for this, it will translate into something else. And
so when you listen to other people's music, whether it's in a club or other contexts, what do you feel? What emotions does that evoke you?
Yeah, well, I think this is a good point. It's actually one of the things I forgot to mention when you were asking, you know, like, how do you express your emotions? Or how, rather, I guess in this case, how would I deal with emotions? I mean, listening to music is like a huge thing. I mean, I'm listening to music all day, every day, because I work a job where I work from home, and often it's a case of just putting on headphones, discovering new stuff, Other times just, yeah, if I'm in a certain mood, I already know what I want to listen to. And then I kind of go down little rabbit holes, and I think this is really nice. Both, yeah, kind of functional at work, but also like depending on the mood that I find myself in, I try to like find the right music to match.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is the same like if I'm going out to concerts or even in a club context. Yeah, for me, it's an inherently emotional experience. It's not necessarily always for like the novelty of it. I mean, there is that aspect, you know, like seeing a spectacle. Like you go to a big concert and there's the lights and there's the smoke and there's the visuals. But yeah, it's more like the sonic qualities that I think I relate to the most. And yeah, so I think definitely like going, I mean, I've been lately, while I've been traveling, also like going to as many concerts as I can, like not only in being in clubs, just trying to, yeah, again, like based on the headspace I'm in right now and based on like the period of my life that I'm in, like how does music fit, and what do I need, yeah, to kind of counterbalance my emotional state.
Yeah. And it seems also like it provides you a lot of inspiration for your own music, and you know, feeds information into you, and then you create out of that as well.
Totally. Yeah, again, like I said, I mean, for most of my life, it's been like this, just listening. Like I do listen to music every single day.
Yeah.
Very rarely techno, actually.
Yeah.
I'm listening to other stuff. Again, it's like, you know, what do I need to like get me through my day in a comfortable way?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very harsh, heavy, intense music. Other times it's very soft, chilled, ambient, jazz, anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, based on what I feel like I need. And this is, this is crucial. And I think obviously the more you listen, the more this informs your own creative output. You know, like I think with any art, like if the more books you read, the better writer you're going to be.
For sure.
The more films you've watched, the better filmmaker you'll be. I think just the more informed you are. I mean, there is risk of, you know, developing too much of a vocabulary where you start to become like a copycat. You know, like you almost know too much, and now you've got too many points of reference, and start sometimes clouding your own creative output. But I think for the most part, it's like a net positive thing to like immerse yourself in different types of music and let that naturally inform your own creative practice.
Yeah, and then from there you distill things, and then you create your own voice, your own style.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also a bit of a skeptic of the whole, you know, like creating your own voice, creating your own style. I believe everything's like cyclical and repetitive to some degree. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of artists that stand out and like have a very clear voice. But even that you could find, like, if they gave you a list of their like inspirations, you would find elements of that. Yeah, I think it's like the way you kind of interpret your vocabulary. So you build the vocabulary, and how do I use that to like do something that still feels my own, even if it's not like groundbreakingly unique, but that it's still like, is an honest expression, and not just like, oh, I heard this one sound and I want to throw that into one of my tracks. Or like, rather, if I do really like that sound, how can I take that and then morph that into something of my own? Yeah,
that sounds more like me eventually.
Say again?
It sounds more like you. Like
exactly. That, And I think even, I mean, again, I'm not sitting down in the studio and trying to be like, say to myself, I've got to like chase my own sound. I have to make my own sound. I don't know. I just feel like that's a very heavy limitation to put on oneself. Like rather just do what do what sounds good to you. And if you listen to it, you still feel connected to it in some way. Like that's probably good enough.
For sure. And tell me more about your creative process. So when you sit down in the studio to make techno, let's say, let's restrict it to techno. Do you try to create, do you start with an idea, I want a track that sounds like this, or you just play, or something else?
It depends. I mean, at the moment, I'm a little bit more, like, less into the idea of, like, finding the right kick, or, like, creating the right kick, and then creating the right, like, I don't know, 4/4 pattern. I used to really enjoy this process. Like, it just, at some points, it starts to feel a bit, like, mundane. Whereas now I like to rather just start with like the main kind of motif, which is usually like some sort of sound. So it could be like a synth sound or like a percussive sound or anything, but like some sound that like catches my ear that I think could be the main motif of the track. And then kind of build it out from there. So can I turn this little thing into something rhythmic, or is it just like something that ebbs and flows throughout the track? As long as it like catches my ear, I'll try and like use it as a starting point to like make something.
Yeah.
Rather than, do the whole thing of, like, okay, I'm producing a techno track, therefore I need this type of kick, and the kick has to be 4/4, and then there's a hat on the off beat, and then a clap on the on beat, and like to me, this part kind of like comes later now. Like rather, what is the main sound that interests me, and then how do I build the stuff on top of that?
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Because we'll talk about it in a bit more, but you also have a day job that is very demanding. You have other activities, including the label, for example, that takes a lot of your energy and time. How, for people who are in a similar situation, who have chosen or have to do another job or have something demanding, can be family, can be new kids, newborns, how do you make sure that you also have time for your creative practice?
I don't.
You don't? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't have time.
Yeah. Tell me more. Like, for example...
No, I'm obviously being extreme here. Mm-hmm. But yeah, obviously as I've grown older and life has gone in a certain direction, I have naturally had less, well, not naturally, just based on how my life has gone, I've had less and less time for music. Yeah. There's been certain job opportunities that came up. I also come from Cape Town. To be like realistic about where I live. I'm not making a techno career living in South Africa. It's just unrealistic. Yeah. So there was a number of things that happened that led me to this position, which is like, I have a full-time day job. Yeah. But I've also been doing music for, the better half of my life. Mm-hmm. It's always stuck with me through university, through various jobs. I've grown the label, done my music production, DJing, and back when I was studying, I had a bit more time, and this is actually where I think a lot of the initial big creative outlet came, right? Because I just had the kind of space, I had the flexibility. I think it allowed my label to grow in quite a nice way. It allowed me, to put out tracks in quite a consistent way. But and you grow older and life kind of takes over. And now it's just been like trying to constantly shift and rebalance things constantly. Yeah. And this could even mean like not to do music for a while. Sure. Like, going back to the pandemic example, I mean, I kind of stopped for a while. I mean, I was still writing some of the more like ambient, non-techno stuff. But even that was sparse. It was like for a few months, but in the whole context of that period, like 2 to 3 years, it was like almost nothing. Yeah. And then, it wasn't the greatest feeling because I was like, am I losing this? Am I ever going to regain my inspiration for this? But I did. Yeah. So I think it's good to like remind yourself, like be gentle with yourself. Like at what time, like when do you need to pull away from it? When do you need to give of your all and actually sacrifice other things? Like sometimes it'll be like, you know what? I'm not going out this weekend because actually I feel there's some fire, there's some inspiration. I need to get it out. Yeah. It feels best to like lock myself in the studio for the weekend rather than go out with friends or see family, And then there'll be other weekends where it's like, well, I don't feel super inspired. So actually now I'm going to do the other thing. I'm going to like be outdoors. I'm going to see friends. And I think, like trusting how you feel with it. Yes. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're not like forcing yourself to do it, probably whatever the cadence is, like however often you're able to do it is like fine. Yeah. Again, I also understand, some artists have a music career to uphold, and that might be a bit difficult. Like, okay, you need to have a certain level of output in order to maintain a kind of career. And I can't speak too much about that because, I've never really been in that position. Yeah, you've chosen another path, yeah, I can only say that, the path that I've been on is one of like, just having to like switch back and forth between things in a way that still feels healthy, both for my normal work life and my music life, which kind of runs parallel, but like mostly on the side. Yeah. And I think I really resonate with what you just said about being kind to yourself. Like understand that like you have made a choice of what your life setup is going to be, and that choice also means that you cannot do 200 things full time. Yeah. You're only a human being with so much like brain computing power and emotional energy for things. And I think it's understanding also like your own personal limits. There's some people who, they're like studio machines. They can lock themselves away for months and like not see the light of day. And that's the way they function. I just know for myself, I can't. And if I had to force myself to do that for the sake of like, I need to do more musically. Yeah. It just wouldn't work out well in the end, For sure. Yeah, it makes sense. And like the good thing is that you
you're intentional about your own life. It seems like from the little we know each other that you have made a decision, you are at peace with that, you're behind that, you're not like in like kind of in two different shoes that are like you're thinking one end, okay, that's my balance that I want, and the other there's a part of you that is saying fuck you, you should be doing more music.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
but again, this has also shifted over time. I mean, when I was younger and like in my university years, I think there was this desire to somehow try and get to Europe, but also back then I only had a South African passport. I couldn't really travel. It's more of like a pipe dream,
right.
But that also gave me a lot of like energy to like push forward with stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to travel so much, but like I'm going to write a lot of music. I'm going to send this to DJs. I'm going to do my label and build connections, bring other artists down to South Africa. Even though I know like this is not going to just fully open the doors for me to go to Europe, it was like a good enough touch point. And then of course, I was thinking maybe someday there's a way for me to like move to Berlin and like do the whole classic Berlin move.
Yeah.
But then as I got older and time passed and I did manage to travel a bit, like I just, my opinions and ideas changed, and I think this is normal as well,
Yeah.
Not to say that I wouldn't ever make that move. It's just, I think the way my life is now, I'm also just like trying to consider all the aspects of it in a kind of rational way as much as possible. And again, as long as I feel like I've got the balance I need at a given moment, I'm usually satisfied. There's many times where it's off balance and it's very frustrating and I have to like try and rebalance it. I mean, it's something I'm trying to get better and better at all the time. It's like super difficult. I think especially when I feel like I've got less creative time or it's not even less creative time, less creative energy. I think it's two different things. Like we all have time actually. It's the way you prioritize it and then what energy you have to put into those things that you want to put into in that time.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I do work 8 to 9 hours a day, but I clock off at a certain time and I then do actually have time after that before I go to bed. But it's a question of energy. And I think as I've gotten older and like work's gotten more demanding, it's harder to find that creative energy. And for me, that's almost quite like a worrisome thing. I'm like, if I start feeling like I don't have any creative energy left, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So as soon as I kind of like feel like I'm reaching that point, I try and like have an awareness of it and see what I can do to try and again, like rebalance things.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's like a constant like push-pull.
Yeah. Was there a moment recently, just to have a real example, where you were in that situation where you felt like, okay, your creative energy is being completely sucked out of you, might be the job, maybe something else going on in your life, that you had to say, okay, fuck it, I need to go back to some time for me, for my creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say actually the last year or two has been quite challenging creatively. But instead of like saying, okay, I need to somehow find more energy for this creative stuff, I just pulled away from it for a bit.
Right.
It's like, a good way to look at it is if you like check my label catalog, like the releases over the last like year or two are a lot more sparse, like 1 or 2 releases a year. Whereas like in the early days of the label, it'd be like 3 or 4 releases a year.
Right.
And that was just like, again, I just didn't feel like I fully had the energy for it. And I didn't want to try, suck the energy out of myself just to like grind through this. So it's like, that's not what I do it for anyway. I do it for fun. But it was challenging. And like only now later, like I'd say in the last couple of months, I feel like I've kind of renewed my energy for it. So now there's like a couple of more releases scheduled for the label. I've got, like writing. It's been a while since I've written like an EP for another label. I'm busy working on something again. And I think this was also like, I think travel helps a lot. So obviously I'm here now, but like I think in the lead up to travel, there was this kind of anticipation, this excitement. It kind of got my like brain ticking again a little bit. I think a lot of it was maybe just like, I'd gone through various life changes at home, like moving out, living by myself, different environment, different space.
Yeah.
Being happy, but quite uncomfortable a lot of the time. And then I think once I allowed that to kind of settle on its own, then naturally this kind of the creative juices slowly were like flowing again.
Yeah. Because maybe like, I really like what you said about energy. Like I think it makes sense. Like sometimes you have moments where even things that would not normally take energy out of you take energy because it's too many things at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's probably a moment where I think forcing yourself to put energy into something else is like not really productive.
Yeah.
Or you're saying you're pulling back, you're taking a bit of a backseat for whatever 2 months to recharge, and then you refine the life force, and then you start really getting excited about music and creative again.
Yeah, I think especially with like creative endeavors. I mean, everyone has their different reasons for doing music or doing art or film, fashion, whatever it may be. I mean, my reason for doing it is that like I just enjoy the process.
Yes.
As simple as that. So it's like if I'm in a position where I'm not enjoying the process, it means I'm not in the space to be doing it. Like at least this is the way I understand it.
Right.
And I can't really just like flip the switch or just change that. Like I have to feel like I'm enjoying it. And yeah, I mean that's creative. That's the creative process for me. I mean, similar with any other art form. I mean, I actually studied fine art at university and did painting, and like I haven't picked up a paintbrush in I don't know years, like since I graduated basically.
Yeah.
Which is, God, if I think about it, like more than 10 years ago, around 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not because I like just don't enjoy painting anymore. It's just I wasn't in the right space, the right place. I wasn't feeling the right kind of creative fire or spark for that. It translated itself more into music. So again, as long as I feel like I have to have this aspect of like, there's something I need to get out, and I will enjoy doing this.
Yeah. It seems like also like for people as a advice or suggestion, like to sometimes we try to solve the problem right now. When you feel stuck, you feel like we have this problem-solving mentality where you need to find a solution, find someone, push yourself to the maximum, which I think works for some people, but not always. Like, sometimes you just need to say, hey, take a step back, take a pause.
Yeah, and ironically, this is one of the nice things about having a full-time job is that you're forced to take a break.
Yeah.
I'm constantly forced to take breaks.
Again, from music, you mean?
Yeah.
Sure.
Creative breaks. Yeah. Again, it's a double-edged sword. There's many pros, many cons, but I think one of the big pros of having like some sort of other thing you do with your time, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a day job, but just something else that you split your creative mind from, it can only be productive. I don't see how it can't be. And I've spoken to many like, big touring artists that we've brought to South Africa, and many of them, a lot of artists that I respect, are like, hold on to your day job. Like once you go down the road of like full creative endeavor, things change, especially if you kind of like rush down that path. And I think if you can kind of if I can build myself up to that, it would make a lot more sense, where I feel like I'd be in a position of like, I've done the life of, balancing the day job, balancing the creativity. Now slowly the pendulum's swinging more to the creative side. Things are naturally opening up. I'm connecting with the right type of people. I'm getting the right kind of events that I connect with, or that I resonate with. Then I would maybe go there. But until then, I think I'm quite happy to kind of have this little switch up. Work creativity, and like have a little bounce between those two. I think for me, somehow, I think it's two parts. Somehow retaining that enjoyment over a long period of time would be successful. I think, a lot of people get bored very quickly, give it up very quickly. I know this is like inherently part of me. I need to do music in some shape or form in my life. And if I can carry on enjoying it and just doing it, even if it's not always at a rapid pace throughout my whole life, like I'd consider that pretty successful. And then there's obviously the more like ego-driven side of it as well, which is like, it's nice when, you get people responding to what you're putting out, like DJs playing your music, or bumping into people who are like, oh yeah, like this track you wrote like 4 years ago on this EP was like really, really cool. And I'm like, the fact that you even know that is like quite amazing. And makes me feel, say, more proud. It is like some level of success, but I like to think of it also in a very like base level way. Like if I enjoy what I'm doing and this reflects well to like people and artists that I respect, like this is enough for me.
Success. Right. And are you a person that tends to plan long term? Are you trying to plan for the next 5 years, or you just go with the flow? I'm quite a pragmatic person, but mostly like, I'd say in my life, like a little bit outside of music. In the early days of doing music, I was very like process driven, very like timeline driven, calendar driven. But this was also like in the early phases of it, where like you have a different level of excitement for it. You just like, it's all you can think about. And it's like, I just want to release as much music as I can. And, I need to be releasing every month. And I was doing that. And I had this like
quite a serious like schedule.
Yeah.
But then that kind of like slowly passed. I was like, this is A, not sustainable, and B, it's like just eventually it's not fun anymore. It just feels like it's like a factory, like a factory system. And I'm like, this is like completely contradictory to the way that I, do this, like write music.
Because the enjoyment goes down. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, eventually. And especially with like running the label, initially it was like the first version of the label was like for putting out my own music, because I had a lot of my own music and I'd sent it to other labels, but they weren't so interested. And I was like, well, I have enough faith in it, so I'm going to put it out. And I had tons of it, so I could just like schedule it in, get the ball rolling. But then I realized, it's not actually, for me, like it's not going to be the best way to do it. It's not sustainable. A lot of the music that I release, I look back on it and I'm like, I don't even really like it that much. But it was a good lesson learned. It was like, that was like understanding and playing with these kind of like structures. And then later on, I became like less and less rigid with it. To right now, it's at the point where both for my own music and my label, again, it's just like, are things aligning? Do I have stuff to share? Do I have stuff that I want to put out? If yes, we'll put together a little run of releases. Or even if it's just one, it's fine. I'll put out one release on my label. If it takes another 2 years to do another one, so be it. But again, this is with the benefit of hindsight. It was with the benefit of also having like developed the label over a long time. I would say there's something to be said of having a kind of a good structure early on to get the thing off the ground. Not even just a label, but like your own productions. Have enough of a catalog, like strong music that you've sat on for a while, and then have some sort of plan. I don't see any harm in that. But I think then later on, you've got to kind of allow that plan to kind of just dissolve a little bit. I don't know. Again, there's some also like freak producers who are just like writing a ton of good stuff at a rapid rate, and they, can plan fairly far ahead. Yeah. I'm just not at that position anymore. It's more like, piecing together an EP every I don't know, half a year, sometimes a year. The music I'm getting in for my label is I'm not more careful with it, so I'm not. Things just take longer, and I'm more satisfied with this now.
Yeah. It seems like for you, especially in this moment in your life, taking more time, it's a really good part of it makes things more enjoyable and more feasible as well. So there's no reason for you to push more. I think.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And again, especially with, the way my life has changed and morphed over time, it feels like the right way of working for now. Where I'm not overworking myself. I mean, I do still overwork myself, but not in like a very detrimental way. Like enough where it's like, I feel like I'm putting in the amount of energy it requires right now. Sure. Not much less, not much more. And I'm sad, and I think most importantly, I'm like quite satisfied with the output. Yeah. Whereas back then, like 5 to 7 years ago, it was like very nice having this like release schedule, but it was just like tons of stuff, and there was like less quality control. I don't necessarily regret it. It's just like if I look back, it was just like it's like not practical. It made sense at the time in some ways, but right now I feel like I've like learned from that, and I've just applied what I've learned to the way that I do things today. Yeah.
So for someone who is emerging, let's say, aspiring producer who's considering production as part of their career, not necessarily the only thing that they do long term, and is in no releases yet, is considering they started to have some music that they think might be releasable, but they're struggling to get anybody to listen to it. They're sending to labels and nothing. What would be your advice? Would you make them consider to have a label?
Labels are tricky.
Yeah, it's more work.
I wouldn't dive straight into a label. I mean, I think there's no real strict way of doing this, but probably like from my experience and what I've learned through having done both my own label and sending music to other labels, I think it's develop like a catalog of stuff. Like, I don't know, you just set your own parameters, 20 tracks, 30 tracks, 50 tracks, whatever you think makes sense. Sit on it for a while, send it to friends, send it to DJ friends. If you have no DJ friends, make DJ friends. We've got social media. It's like, I don't know. I mean, you see it all the time. Like, hop on Instagram, follow some DJ whose music you play and say like, hey, I'm starting in the game. Here's a couple of tracks on my SoundCloud. I mean, maybe select a few. Don't send 50 tracks to one person and annoy them. send them a select few tracks, like maybe you'd be interested in this for your set. Do it with like no intention, just, well, not no intention, but at least with like the humble intention of just like getting feedback.
No expectations.
Or low expectations, you know, like at least I'd like to get some feedback on the tracks. Not like, oh yeah, maybe you want to play this in your DJ sets, or, maybe you can suggest some labels for me, or just like listen to the music. What do you think? I just want to learn.
Yeah.
I think this is like a really good natural starting point, and actually one I wasn't so good at. I was like a bit forceful in hindsight, which is why I think I can, look back and make this kind of advice. But yeah, definitely, the very cliched advice of like not rushing, just sit on them. Like there really is literally no rush. There's obviously like, it's nice again for the ego to get good feedback and to have DJs telling you like, yeah, this is great. But I think rather prioritize getting good feedback from artists that you like, that you respect, whose music you play. Slowly build little relationships, see where it goes. And then I think like the next steps kind of reveal themselves, For me, the idea of opening the label literally revealed itself to me. I was like, I've got a lot of this music. I'm sending it to people. Not so many labels are that interested in it, but a lot seem to be giving me good feedback. Some are playing it. I've got quite strong faith in what I'm doing. So therefore, I'm going to just start my own label.
Yeah.
I mean, I had like a few, like in the very early days, like 1 or 2 releases on international labels. They were like nothing groundbreaking. It was enough to kind of get the name out there a little bit. And then I went into my own label. But yeah, it's also like it's a whole different dynamic. And also back then, I think like, Bandcamp was still quite a new thing. Like now you've got like many options to actually do this. Or like even test the waters, like if you've got 50 tracks and you've sent a bunch of them to producers that you respect, and there's like 3 that you're always getting good feedback on.
Right, that's a selection. Yeah, feedback,
like maybe put out one of those tracks every month on your own Bandcamp, send it to people, see what the responses are like. You don't have to like upload it all at once. Like slowly drip feed it to people.
Yeah.
And see what you get like in the real world. Like are people downloading this? Are people playing this? I think this is a good start before like jumping into doing your own label. Maybe even sending to other labels. Like also sending to other labels, it's not going to change your life.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I mean, unless it's like you really strike a big label, I don't know. These days, there's not that much to gain, in my opinion, either.
Yeah. It depends also like what point you're in career, but I agree. Like it's not that like. Also, I think many times like we think that one gig, one label, one whatever.
Yeah, so like all of a sudden my life's gonna change.
Yeah, for sure. It's
again for some people it does, but these are like, I mean, look, it's so rare.
Yeah, and it's unpredictable. I think also.
Yeah, it seems like it happens a lot because you're following a lot of these people, and it's like there's like a quick rise to fame, but in reality, it's pretty rare. I think for most people, it's a fairly slow build. Or even those that do kind of seem to shoot to fame actually have a fairly long story that people don't really know.
You don't see with the years that they've spent in studio.
Yeah, exactly. Or like playing in their hometown, small gigs for 10 years, and like, okay, now they're based in Europe and they're getting all these gigs, but like, they've been grinding at it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And yes, there's rare cases of like, artists that are maybe a bit new and just, I don't know, they just got exceptional music and it just blows up.
Yeah.
So I think it's like understanding what you have, what your intentions are, making connections, trying to not have too many lofty expectations about where your music's gonna take you.
Yeah, for sure. Talking about like this whole thing, like what's one belief that you had to let go of over time, or something you really changed your mind on in the recent years?
I think, it was more like a hard lesson to learn that I had to just realize is a reality, is that no one's going to help you.
In life in general.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very like nihilistic way of looking at it in a sense, like if I say it that bluntly, but it's something I've kind of learned is like, you got to do shit by yourself. I mean, I wouldn't say this is something I've learned recently, something I learned quite early on, but I think it's a good realization to have quickly. Actually, then no one's going to help you and then no one owes you anything. So, and I think if you actually adopt this, like, you'll have a bit of a smoother path. You won't get so like emotionally invested in things. Yeah. Because I mean, creativity is emotional. And I think if you just do your shit by yourself, keep it DIY, not not expect someone to give you something, or like my music is this and therefore I should be there, or like I've played this many gigs in this many places and therefore I'm owed that. I think, this is a good like realization to have.
It's super important for people to realize that I think you can only control so much, and sometimes people, for whatever reason, like they have their own agenda, so you mentioned they can't help you. It's not about you. It's just like, they have their own shit going on. They have so much stuff they need to take care of. And
yeah, exactly. And depending on your own context, again, I was never really here in the epicenter in Europe where like all the big festivals and the clubs are going on, and I'm back home on the other side of the world, and I was like, the only way for me to do this is like to do it by myself.
yes.
I mean, it just made the most sense. And sure, again, I still did release on other labels. I worked with some great artists and label owners, but the core of it was like DIY. I was like, but I also didn't have the expectation that like, okay, I'm going to release on this label, and now this label owner's going to book me for their events. I mean, I'm sure it'd be nice, but you can't expect these things to happen. And even now, I mean, I think, the sad reality is like, I mean, I love the community and I love the scene, but often there isn't so much reciprocity. Like, there's not so much like, hey, like, we host you, we hosted you in our country, I'll host you in ours, and like have this kind of dialogue.
Yeah.
It happens in rare occasions, and I think a lot of people like speak about it. But there is, in a sense, still a little bit of this kind of gatekeeping. But again, I get it. I'm like sympathetic to it.
Yeah.
And like, I think if I let it kind of like get to me,
Yes, exactly.
it would just ruin the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, rather just carry on. Like you said, do what is within my control, which is run my label, produce my music, connect with others, host people in my country, and see what happens from there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. I think it's reassuring also for people who are thinking, whatever career they have, music, non-music, label, no label, I think it's super important to keep this in mind.
Yeah.
And as we're going to wrap up, I'm going to ask you some questions. Answer it like as fast as you want, like without thinking so much. And
I'll try.
We start with the hard one, which is what drives you in life?
Happiness. I think that's the thing that secretly drives everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you found your happiness right now?
I'm getting there.
Couple more years.
Yeah. Maybe still a lifetime.
What's something that people tend to assume about you that isn't true?
Yeah. That I'm unapproachable and that I'm like some tough guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think is the reason why?
Definitely tattoos. Definitely the tattoos, and I don't smile a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why. I just don't.
It's just like maybe your way of approaching, communicating with the world. You don't need to smile.
Yeah. And it's not an intentional, barrier that I'm putting up. It's just the way that I navigate the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very possible. Yeah. I think smile. Yeah, for sure. Tattoos.
Yeah.
Different impression.
Yeah.
What's a guilty pleasure track of yours that you would never play in a set?
Well, I wouldn't say I would never play it in a set, but anything from the Pet Shop Boys.
Pleasure Boys? Oh,
Anything.
flamboyant.
I don't even know if it's guilty.
Yeah.
It's a little bit guilty, yeah.
One of my favorite songs is, I think it's Flamboyant, like Bad by them.
Yeah.
Amazing song, yeah. If you were to decide to play to a crowd of 10,000 people, massive stadium, huge gig, massive sound system, really good adrenaline vibe, but you don't have the chance to meet any of them because you need to travel super fast, versus 20 friends in a house, what would you choose?
Probably the unpopular opinion. 10,000 people in a big club or in a big warehouse. Yeah, I think A, you've got more opportunity to bring people into your world who might not understand it, and B, I know what happens with friends. They come to your first gig and never come again, so so I don't need to play to them. Yeah,
they will leave anyway. So you're like, yeah, fair enough. It's even worse because then you feel like, oh fuck, it's personal to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fair enough. And what's one artist, doesn't have to be a musician, but can be, dead or alive, that you would get stuck on a deserted island with for a week?
Yeah, I've actually said this in one of some other interview I did, but it would have to be David Lynch.
David Lynch,
yeah. I love David Lynch. Yeah, I just think he's like a quirky character. He's like curious about a lot of things.
Yeah.
I feel like my brain ticks in the same way. He's quite like a crossover artist. I mean, he's obviously known for film, but he's like dabbled in music, dabbled in art, even wrote a book about meditation. Yeah, like all these like different things. I feel like we would have very long conversations, and it would be intellectually stimulating.
Very interesting.
Maybe not the best for survival, but
You meditate for
at the very least, time would go quickly until we die. Yeah,
exactly. But it will be inspiring.
yeah.
What's a project or more than one project that you are really excited about for your near future?
I think actually like getting the label kind of picking up steam again. It's felt like it almost felt like a bit dead for a while. So it's nice. I've got an EP from myself. I've got an EP from a young Dutch artist who will also be doing an EP, and that's coming in the next few months. So this feels nice. So like, I mean, I don't have much more beyond that, but I think usually when I've got at least 1 or 2 releases in the pipeline, this kind of gets things going. And then also writing new music for another label, which is not my own, which is something I haven't done in a long time.
Congrats. Yeah, sounds exciting. Looking forward also to hearing more the music on your label and on the other label.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a closing tradition, which is we ask every guest what's one question we should ask the next guest without knowing who they're going to be.
Can ask them what's the square root of 144.
Bam, Lois, I know the answer as well. Let's go. And there's a question for you, which is what keeps you going and make you stay sane?
I think exercise and being outdoors, which is not so good for being a producer, but it keeps me going. I still feel like if that's the one thing that just had to disappear from my life, many things would fall apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sport and activity.
Yeah.
Very true. Dean, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. It's been great to get to know you, and thank you for spending time with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Amazing.